Isn't it time that we have a national conversation as a country? The economy is tanking, taxes are rising, things are going down the tubes. All we can hear is all about political peccadillos and chicanery. It is time that we had a conversation in this country. It is time that we declutter and have a real conversation. And this is Siasa Bomba. I am Dibala Nair. Welcome to today's installment of Siasa Bomba. My name is Dibala Nair. I'm happy, I'm really stoked that you've joined us. Today we're turning our focus still on population, and primarily we're looking at social security, infrastructure, planning, and population growth as issues that play a role in our political priorities. Right now, we know all the parties are aligning themselves even as we're gearing towards general election, but are these issues that they're putting on the table as far as the manifesto is concerned, or their manifestos. And I'm really happy also to be driving the show with me with very renowned political strategist and also a consummate professor of population. This is Professor Alfred Agwanda Otieno, who is an associate research professor, population studies and research institute at the University of Nairobi. He holds a PhD in population studies. His main area of interest is statistical demography. His studies have focused on policies and programs, comparative studies within African perspectives, and in monitoring and evaluation of programs. He has published and also co-authored several papers in peer-reviewed international journals such as PLOS One, BMJ Social Science and Medicine, Journal of Biosocial Sciences, Demography, India, and African Population Studies. He has published 3 books, or 3 book chapters, and co-authored 1 book, Urban Integration in Africa, Socio-Demographic Survey of Nairobi. So there is a rich, of course, repository of knowledge as far as population is concerned. We have as well Mr. Frederick Ashuse Shombe Okango, who is the Secretary, Political Affairs at KANU, an accomplished political strategist and commentator with extensive knowledge in multimedia communication, political management and strategy, leadership and governance. He is a Commonwealth scholar, a system thinking in a practitioner with interest in sustainable development, environment and climate change and law as well. Currently, he is a Secretary, Political Affairs in Kenya African National Union Party, that is KANU. And so, yes, we have the politics and we have the policies and the research also cognating to today. What a show are we going to have? You can peg your thoughts at Twitter handle, that is Siasa Bomba, using the same hashtag as well, Siasa Bomba, to also express your comments or ask your questions as well. But I'm glad to have you on board, Fred.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Maybe just to get introductory remarks, even as we're heading towards this, a very heightened political season we have in the country. And I was wondering,
Absolutely.
the issue of population, given the statistics that we've been discussing, we have it here that Kenya's population has been growing rapidly over the last 30 years and is projected to double in about 23 years. Right, Fred, let's just begin with you in terms of preparation, because we know right now also your parties and many of them are preparing their manifestos. What we are concerning ourselves with in this particular discussion also centered in your manifestos?
Thank you, Dibal, and thank you for welcoming me to Siasa Bomba. I would say that as a country, we are not prepared. You just mentioned that the population with time is expected to double. And if you look at the current world population that is placed at 7 billion, then you come back to Kenya, when you refer to Worldometer, I think our population is around 55 million. As per the population census 2019, our population is at 47 million. Now, look at the demographics, the increasing number of youth, the young people, and that number is expected to attain what we could call demographic dividend that we have not achieved, and also the demographic transitions. That brings a very big risk to the country in terms of planning for such a young population in terms of economic growth, employment, opportunities, health, infrastructure, and the rest. And therefore, political parties, while planning, must ensure that while that is not yet achieved, how do they ascertain the numbers and how do they ensure that they have got infrastructure in place offered by the government to secure the lives of this youthful population, which otherwise, Dibal, can also be very useful in economic growth. So I would answer you by saying Kenya as a country, and having given the facts therein, are not ready for the increasing number of population. Even in 10 years, they will not be ready.
And Professor Alfred, of course, we know the last time, and we mentioned a good game in this particular program, we had the population statistical survey was in 2013, the first one in Africa. Is that correct? Have we had any before then?
No, that is incorrect.
It's incorrect.
Yeah. First of all, Kenya has regularly held its census since 1969, since independence, so it has been on time. And the second, Kenya always conducts its surveys, and one of the surveys which is regular since 1989 is called Demographic and Health Survey. But actually, it started in 1977 called Kenya Fertility Survey. So in 1970, that was a different organization, but it was the same scenario. So since 1989, every 5 years, Kenya conducts demographic and health surveys.
Every 5 years?
Every 5 years, since 1989. And as I'm talking to you, currently, because of the census of last year, it was postponed now so that they are going to have their demographic and health survey this year. And currently, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics is training enumerators to conduct the survey. It delayed because it occurred at the same time as census. And census was given priority over the survey. Okay? So Kenya conducts regular demographic and health surveys, which assists you. The first and foremost is planning for the future. Secondly is to understand the vulnerable populations or those who seem to be left behind. So those are the particular issues that concern the Kenya government in terms of their policies, in terms of their program approach. But the issue is, can we be able to generate resources for the current population and the future? That is what we call sustainable development. And since 1995,
Yes.
when we held International Population Conference in Cairo, there was a paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift is that the human being is the center of development. And apart from being the center of development, that human being should also be able to participate in choosing the options for
I'm inclined to wonder then, who was the center of development if it was not a human
before they were scattered.
They were scattered, okay.
Yeah. So it's 1994 that the ICPD, International Conference on Population and Development, that encouraged one thing, that we plan for the human being, and the human being is supposed to take part also in that planning. So it's double-edged. So we do not plan for animals, neither do we plan for buildings, but we plan for a human being, and therefore any other thing added is for this human being to live a better quality of life. That is that is from 1994, Cairo. So we call it ICPD at Cairo. In 2018, the ICPD plus 25 held at Nairobi, same Africa, it reaffirmed what all the United Nations countries reaffirmed the same principle, that the human being is the center of development, but we must recognize also the diversity that exists. That not everybody born, even twins, do not share similar orientations. We have to acknowledge this and take that into account. So there is always what we call demographic diversity. Each and every individual has the unique potential, but has also certain frailties that we need to account for. Yeah.
All right. So I like the aspect that you're bringing, demographic diversity.
Yes.
And when we're even talking about demographic diversity, we had a very controversial also debate here regarding what is really coming to the fore with the transgender reassignment and the intersex as well, coming to the fore. How does it really change or the aspect, even from a scholar's perspective here in the country, of the demographic diversity, or that is diametrically different from what you're talking about?
Well, that's different from what people talk about.
Yes.
First of all, we talk about demographic diversity because at present, when you take a picture of the Kenyan population as at now, there is a 1 second year born, and there is a 100-year-old person. So that's the first diversity that we have.
Yes, age. Age.
2, we recognize biologically that there are 2 sexes. We don't use gender.
We don't use gender.
We don't use because gender changes. Sexes. That there's male and there's female. So gender is now a social construction of the roles of the males and females in society. It's now when you add gender. So it's bad to ask anybody, what's your gender?
What's your gender?
Yeah.
It's a misnomer.
It's a misnomer. So we don't use it.
You don't use it?
Yeah, but other people use it and so on. But when we start with, we only have male, female. But you can recognize that there are certain few individuals that might not conform to those 2. Not from social construction,
Yes.
but biological error or an accident that can happen. You remember in the last census we had
The intersex?
intersex.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but generally for many countries, male, female,
Male, female.
from biological point of view. Then we add gender from social point of view, how you are assigned your roles and responsibilities by the society. Yeah.
All right. Let's just get to Fred on that. I don't know if you want to chime into what our professor is saying before we gravitate to other issues as well.
I think I agree with the professor. But also we have to remember that even the aspect of gender itself politically has been a very hot debate.
Yeah.
And if you look at the provision of social services, majority of the female gender have argued that they are marginalized. And to that extent, they have demanded for more from government so that they are at par with the other partner, the other gender, the male, for that matter, for this explanation.
A very heated debate we had also
exactly.
with the ladies. Yeah.
So if you look at it, it is important that even as we provide social infrastructure, or rather social security, to the 2 sexes, male, female, we must identify which of them is vulnerable most and which one of them needs special attention. And that's why in the provision of law, Article 100, the female were identified, now called women, as a special interest group. That must be taken care of when planning, when budgeting, and when representing and legislating, and even when making policy. Because their needs have changed. Their needs keep changing. And that population of the female gender, if you look at 2019 census, by the way, in 2019, the theme for the census was counting our people for sustainable development and devolution of services. Why did they say that? Because they realized that there are certain aspects of that gender that, if not met in the immediate terms, then will affect the entire population. For example, things to do with mortality rate. For example, things to do with fertility rate. Because we are at a country where we have a growing population. But look, how do we deal with the growing population and the economy is not growing? Vision 2030 projected the economic growth rate at 10%. We have not achieved that. But with the challenges of social demographics and the rest, then we must start planning for a special interest group called the women, the youth, the disabled, and at some point I'm sure we'll talk about the ethnic minority. So I agree with Prof. While segregating them, we must be careful so that we look at the inter and the intra of that specific unit of population.
Right, thank you. Let's gravitate the discussion a bit now to urbanization, because I think also that one is it goes really hand in hand with population growth, and it is estimated almost 50% of Kenya's population will be living in urban areas by 2030, and we wonder, looking at the spatial planning, even from our cities, as it were. I think the last time that we had that launch was in 2016. Right, and given 2030 is just here, how many years down the line? Another 8 years, yeah, we'll be having a dramatically different city altogether. Do you think, from your own assessment, Prof, the government, especially the county government of Nairobi and other urban areas as well, have a concrete spatial plan to go in tandem with this given projection?
Yeah, let me start from the fact that urbanization is inevitable, whether we like it or not, it will occur. Two, that urbanization is also an opportunity. You can put people in the concentration of people, provide services per capita easier than when you're in the rural. Look at just electricity. To pick electricity from one point here, and if the next homestead is 2 or 3 kilometers away, then you have to step it up, then step it down at a higher cost. So urbanization is inevitable. And what now we think about is how do we plan for it? Okay? This is one of the things of the 21st century and for developing countries. Yes, we are still at a lower level, but we are not planning for rapidly changing urban population. Let's take an example. How many Kenyans are homeless in the urban areas? Before we just talk about how many Kenyans are homeless, we don't know. Because there has not been any official published information on those who live in four walls and a roof and a door, and those who live on the streets. So the first thing is that we are not taking into account the increasing number of people living in in urban centers. Two, we are not anticipating the number of people living in urban centers. This needs to be taken into account. Fundamentally, planning for development is taking into account the current population and without jeopardizing the needs for the future. How much are we prepared to account for the needs for the future urban population if we don't plan for it now? We only know how many people are in the urban centers, but that is not enough. We need to know how many are where and what services do they have. What it particularly says is that when the development is about human being, it's about living in better conditions. So how much are we prepared to know how many people live in the urban area? How many people are without any services, which is their right? So the political parties have not seen anything that they mentioned with regard to the people of Kenya. Yet, we all assigned and tested that by 2030, we should not leave anybody behind. How many people are we leaving behind? He has just mentioned that we are leaving women behind. But how many people are we leaving behind or pushing behind? How many people?
So the political parties, even with their, their 20 points agenda,
Yeah.
as it were, they are not, gelling with what is the reality of the ground. That is what you're saying at the end of the day. When it comes to urbanization.
Yeah, the idea of a political party is how the groups of people come together on how to share resources in a country. And how to share resources.
I
So-
disagree with
Yeah.
Prof.
Yeah,
I mean,
Which politics at the end of the day is all
It's
about.
it's the sharing of resources.
Yeah, the
Because
sharing of resources. At
You
the
are
end of the
not
day.
going to generate any resource from somewhere else. It's the resources of the country. Now, how do you share resources? You share resources among the people who live in the country.
that's true.
Okay? Now, how you share it is there are differences. There are different manifestos and so on.
Right.
But the main thing, they all say how we equitably share the resources of the country. to
Mukango was
people.
saying not to be agreeing with you on
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
Yes.
Prof was a bit intelligent. What he did, he rephrased his answer. But with that as me, Dibal, you know, in this country, we are governed by the rule of law. And we have got structures of sharing resources. But when you look at the homeless, are they counted as part of the people who don't have a roof over their head at any given time or at all times? That data is not available. However, we have the data that shows that how many households we have. The last
But
population
whose remit is it to actually make
is the
sure?
government. It's the government.
Which part of the government?
It's the government.
Which ministry?
You know, Jabal, when you are planning for those who are born and those who have not been born, because you do projections. And the Prof will correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
However, the urban population today in Kenya is 28.7%. That is over 14 million people are staying in urban. The infrastructure in urban is stretched. Look at the slum upgrading system, the slum dwellers. That infrastructure comes with sanitation, water, electricity. Forget about food for now. It is stretched. Now, when the government plans through their manifesto and through policies. And that's why we say political parties are a group of citizens who are coming together, first of all, to form government and then perform or offer services to that government. Okay? Now, in Kenya today, we have a government. The government of President Uhuru Kenyatta, for the last 9 years and a half or so, they came up with what they call affordable housing. That was not enough. As Kenya African National Union, we appreciate, and we are saying now, we must have affordable and decent housing for every Kenyan. That is an agenda under social security pillar in our manifesto that is bringing back this country to business. And we are saying the first thing that the political parties must do, they must understand that housing is more important than any other infrastructure.
So are you insinuating in any way that the affordable houses that we get now from the government are not decent?
I'm saying, other than being affordable, it must be decent. What aspect of decency that we are looking at? We are looking at issues with sanitation. You can have a house over your head, Dibal. It has no water. It has no electricity. The sanitation is not to the standard as expected. Then it is not what is envisioned in Article 43 of the Constitution of Kenya that guarantees you. This is not a privilege. This is a right. And it is the work of the government to do that. As political parties that are progressive like Kenya African National Union, we understand that that is an aspect of social infrastructure that must be in our document that we are selling to the people of Kenya, so that when we acquire power, we are not only promising, but we are committing to do that aspect of social life. Number two, Dibal, we have also looked at the issues that come with migration, urban migration, rural urban migration. I agree with the Prof. It is inevitable. And by the way, in the next few years, you will look at the number of people in urban centers, not cities, it will increase. Then the one in the cities will budge. Why? Because majority of the social infrastructure and systems are found in urban centers. And that's why, as a political party, KANU, we are saying to cure that, we must now strengthen devolution and access to services by taking all these services to the people's doorsteps in the villages and in the wards. How? We are saying if it is an issue of water, electricity, housing, we must have them first at the village level so that you lower rural-urban migration.
Yeah, just leave it at that. Let's come back to you, Prof, and we now interrogate urbanization and how also is a threat to food security. Because if you look at, let's take the city of Nairobi and the periphery, as you know, towns that we have, or even counties like Kajiado, you go to Machakos as well, people are acquiring huge chunk of land. And there is a land fragmentation that is happening because people now want to put up real estate. You know, a lot of development is, you can see them cropping up at the end of the day. These were land that were meant, you know, to be arable land that can actually be farmland, and we furnish ourselves with, you know, good food at the end of the day, enriching our food basket. How is urbanization also a big threat to food security, if not well tamed?
First of all, that urbanization must be planned for. You must anticipate how many people are coming there, which space is there for living, which space is there for industries, which space is there for recreation, and so on. How many cities or towns in Kenya have published their planned structures? How many? There's none. We still go by structures. In the 1948 plan are still the things that govern Nairobi City. So we do, the fundamental thing is that we need to plan for urban settlements, to allocate how many houses we need in 20 years to come, 50 years to come. What recreation facilities do we need in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, in 30 years' time? China have planned even in 100 years' time.
Yes.
So that is what the use of population data and information is about. Mm-hmm. So how do we plan for the future? And that is the first reason why we put so much money in censuses, we put so much money in surveys, and we put so much money in registration of vital systems, that is births, deaths, marriages, and so on, so that we can be able to know how many people will be there in, but we do not just say how many people, because a child, an adult like you and me, have different consumption rates and production rates. So we should be able to plan for the structure of that population. Okay? That in 10 years' time, the size of the people aged 15 to 24 will be this much, and they'll require jobs. So we need to plan for how we can create this many jobs in the next 10 or 20 years. When I was growing up, there were less than 1% of the urban population who are 60 plus. Today, as I'm talking to you, 4% who live in Nairobi are 60 and above. Okay? Now look at the infrastructure that we have. Go to get public offices. How many of them have opportunities or can give opportunity for an older person that is disabled to go in? How many public toilets or how many hotel toilets have toilets specified for those who are on wheelchair? Those are the things that we talk about. If you put in infrastructure, if you put in urbanization systems, you need to take into account the people.
Right. So where is the nexus between the research that is there and the planning, especially from the political parties? Because there is this rich seam of information, but there is no nexus on even your planning. If you want to come to government then, and you're projecting how you're going to plan the urban settlement, what sort of information are you using? Because right now I'm wondering, for instance, what sort of information are you using?
In progressive political parties, we are saying we must have politics that is data-driven, in the sense that we use previous data and even current data to make commitments that are achievable. It's only through that that you can make commitments that are achievable.
Yes.
We have seen previous governments and other political parties promising. We saw the other day there are people who promised 1 million jobs. They never achieved it. We saw people promising stadia. They never achieved it because that politics was not data-driven. Prof has articulately put it that even today, access to buildings, particularly for the elderly, who are vulnerable groups, there's very limited services that they enjoy to that extent, because majority of the population that people are looking at are young. If today there were 200 elderly people in this building and the lifts go off because of power, and we are on the 26th floor, how are we going to make them access the ground floor? Those are the things we're talking about as a party, where we are very keen on provision for service, provision of services to the elderly, to the youth, and women. But to answer you, what are these political parties using, this government using, so that we achieve planning and budgeting? Number one, government ideally must use population census, and that's why after every 10 years it is done. I am told by my history teachers that in 1897, I think, the population was 2.5 million. Today, we are in 2022. If you read the Worldometer, the current population is 55 million. The world population is expected to be about 10 billion by 2037 or something. Now, that tells you every time people are born, even though others die. So, as people are born, others grow to become elderly. The youth age, the working age, the labor age, 15 to 60, is also growing. But look, we have no means of sustaining that labor age, so that they provide more and give back to the country in terms of development that people can achieve. Now, the government must start planning from data that is available, and they must put a lot of money in research on people like Prof here, so that they put out data, put out policy papers that can help inform the current and the future. That is the challenge that we are having in the politics. But in KANU, we are saying we have relooked at that, and we know where we're coming from. But now that we are headed towards the direction that Kenyans want, with a youthful population that is unemployed, what do we need to do? The first thing that we must do, we must look at the social infrastructure, social security. Where are we? Dibal, today, look at education. How many young people are in school, enjoying learning and hoping to graduate to the next level so that they can be productive in the economy? They're very minimal. Why? Because the infrastructure in schools, they say education is the equalizer. Look at health. In terms of health, female pregnancy, early female pregnancies, that is totally damaging the life of that young girl who would one day want to be the prime minister, the president, the chief justice. Okay? And when doing that, you increase the population where you cannot plan for it because you're not using data. Number three, look at the health insurance for the elderly. How many elderly have access to health insurance? How many receive the social assistance as a constitutional provision for Article 43 that the government must provide for them? Very minimal. When they started giving that money to the elderly, we saw a bit of change. But we are saying it can be made better by making it a commitment. The word is commitment. KANU, as a political party that has got very rich history where we're coming from as a country, is committing today that through that leadership, they shall ensure that they protect the special interest group, where the elderly belong, where the young belong. By number one, looking at the social infrastructure in terms of education, which must be accessible and free. In terms of healthcare, which must be affordable, accessible, and universal. In terms of housing, which must be affordable and decent. If you look at all those things, then go back to the numbers in terms of population, then for sure you can plan. And that's why we are proud as Ken, we are saying we are committing. Because we have looked at the numbers.
Right. Prof, maybe on that particular note, I want to also gravitate the discussion towards youth unemployment and try and also bring the aspect of the recent bill that we saw the MPs are mulling over. This is recalling retirees, you know, from the retirement back to the public service. This is a question I raised earlier as well, because now you are smack dab in the middle of the studies as well. You can give us an insight. How ironical is it that we want to employ our youth, and then we are recalling these retired, public servants because of the expertise, the knowledge that is not, it's smack dab in the middle also of the youth bulge that we have as a country.
That is what I call political failure.
Political failure.
Yeah. Because we did not anticipate that some people with certain skills will retire. So there must have been anticipation that these people with these skills will retire. How do we prepare to replace them? There's no shortage of young Kenyans to be prepared to do any other skill. It is the failure of the government to take into account that you must always plan for the future, anticipate what is going to happen in the future. If you have 200 doctors here now who are specialists in cardiology and so on, then how many do you need in 5 years' time? Therefore, you start by training them now, so that by the time these ones exit, these ones take over. This is the fundamental failure, not only Kenya but many African governments. Planning and anticipating what is likely to happen in the future. Kenya has a rich data compared to very many African countries, and yet has invested in data, although there are certain weaknesses. But how much are we utilizing evidence to anticipate what is likely to happen in the future? This is the fundamental failure. Up to now, we are how many months to election?
Around
7 months. There is no party that is providing an election manifesto. The data that is given by the government should be free and open. So how much are they using that open data to anticipate or to articulate opportunities they want Kenya to do? Being hustler or whatever does not make sense. How are you planning to make sure that you cater and improve the quality of life of people in the country? How do you ensure that there are those people who are not likely to be left behind? Because it doesn't matter whoever comes to the government. The Kenya state signed the 2030 development agenda. Any other person, be it KANU, be it UDA, be it what, will still have to sustain these things that Kenya signed previously. But how much are they aware of what is supposed to be done? This is my worry.
That's your worry.
Yeah.
But even aside that, with the dividend, demographic dividends we're talking about, that youth bulge, we were also in this forum with Mr. Nzomo from the National Council of Population, and we're talking about quality population. So we might be 57 million Kenyans here, right? But when we put the aspect of quality population, which I know is right up your alley, how will you describe the Kenyan population?
The first thing is, that is a eugenics term, which is no longer being used.
Well, it was...
because it had certain connotations actually coming from even politics. Talk about, how about the quality of life that they are leading. That's what we should talk about. Now, the first fundamental thing that you ask, how is the government aware of those who are in valuable positions? Forget about male, female. What proportion of the country are in valuable positions? Just the other day when COVID came in, the same government data, COVID made Kenyans more poorer. And the proportion who are poorer increased as a result of COVID. Okay? How are we prepared? How do we know COVID will not go in the next 1, 2 years or next 10 years? These are the things that we need to take into account. That COVID made Kenyans more poorer, more Kenyans lost jobs. See, Intercontinental is still closed. Yeah? Norfolk is still closed. The people who are working there have families.
Yes.
Yeah. What happened to them? So the thing is, how do we, any time that we are planning, how do we anticipate for the future, given the situation now? Okay? And when we do that, let us not look at all Kenyans and say the population. That is the worst part of planning. These populations are fundamentally different. They are children, they are elderly, they are those who are disabled. How much do we know of these proportions by the various characteristics? How much do we know of their plight? Why they cannot achieve certain aspects of quality of life? This is what planning is for. This is what Mulatia should have known. They talk about demographic dividend as if it is a good that you can bring to, okay? No. There are certain fundamentals that must be done. To us in academia, we call it demographic potential.
Not dividend.
Not dividend. Dividend is when you put the right inputs and resources so that you obtain
The outcome.
the outcome.
Absolutely.
But there is a potential.
There's a potential.
You can either lose it or gain it.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
And in any case,
Briefly, yes.
Dibal, as a country, we are yet to achieve demographic dividend. We are yet to achieve it. Because we're even struggling with what is called demographic transition. High birth rate and death rate. Why do we have high birth rate? Because African culture still dictates that the more children you have, probably the wealthier you are, probably the happier you are. But look at the conditions of life. Today, it demands that you keep your family small because the resources are limited.
But maybe
and
on
it's
the
not
flip side, it
sustainable.
could be also the natural attrition. That you,
Yes.
you want many children because also, given the meager resources and the environment, many of them are dying.
That's true.
Yes.
But that's what I'm saying also. That transition comes with high birth rate, high death rate. The day we achieve low birth rate, low death rate, and stabilize that population segment, particularly the young people, and now provide for them so that they can be resourceful and grow the economy, then we should be talking about demographic dividend at that time. As it is now, I agree with Prof, we're yet to achieve it. But even having said that, the government normally give a report, and Prof will correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's called National Social Protection Survey. If you look at that report, it actually articulates what are the percentages of children that are dying because of poor health services, the mortality rates, the women that, the gender, the female, that are getting early pregnancies and how it affects population and so on and so forth. My issue has been politicians do not refer to such data so that they can plan for the current and future. That is what we are changing in politics. And that's why we are saying this time round, as a political party, Kenya African National Union, we are driven by data. And data-driven politics is the only sure way of achieving sustainable development, of growing the economy in all aspects of social infrastructure and security.
Right, fantastic. Prof, I'm pinched for time. I just give you also 30 seconds to just give your closing remarks.
I think the first fundamental thing is that we plan for the human being,
Plan for the human being.
and not that when we plan for the human being, we must also give the opportunity for human being to take part in that planning. Now, When we do this, we need to take into account evidence. And the only evidence we have is data. I hope whichever party wins, we may improve on our day-to-day vital registration.
Absolutely.
Without data, there's no end. We keep on moving up and down on the wall. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Right, Secretary General, welcome. Your closing remarks.
I think there is a greater potential for this country to attain economic development that is sustainable by first looking at the data available, planning for now and for tomorrow. But when you talk about social infrastructure and security, then we must go and look at the enablers. The enabler number one is health. And more specifically, let's look at reproductive health that affects the women. Then let's go and look at the world equalizer called education. How many have access to education? Then look at housing. How decent are they and how accessible and affordable are they? But lastly, Dibal, these are not easy to do if the information is not accessible, it is not pinned down by legislation and policy, and it does not provide benefit to the majority. And majority here, I mean more than the population that we have. At least majority of that, if not half, but at least 2/3 of it. I mean, three quarters of it. So that we start talking about a country that is equitable and inclusive. Otherwise, we'll be talking about these things as promises and not commitments.
Fantastic.
As KANU,
Let's leave
we
it
are
at that.
committing.
Thank you, thank you. I think I'll give you an invoice also on this show. Yeah, because you really promoted KANU as well today. Thank you very much, Frederick Kango, Secretary Political Affairs at KANU. Thank you. We also want to thank you, Professor Alfred Otieno, Associate Research Professor, Population Studies, Research Institute, University of Nairobi. Thank you for your rich stream of information. I've really learned a lot.
Thank you.
I'll not be using now demographic dividend anymore.
Yeah.
It is
Demographic
demographic potential.
It's dividend when you achieve it.
Yes, dividend when you achieve it. Now
Yeah.
you know, at least you've not taken anything from this particular show, at least now you know about demographic dividends and demographic potential.
And
But-
demographic transition.
and demographic transition as well. Thank you very much for that rich stream of information and for your valued company on watching CS Bomba. My name is Divan Ainem. Have an easy one.